I'm happy to be. Okay, I have to hit got it. Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to be with you again. I haven't been on conversations with CAGT for a couple years, and this is a topic that's very dear to my heart. So I'm going to ask you, how many of you are gifted? I wish I could see your faces because I know only a few people would raise half hands. Most people don't acknowledge their own giftedness. And they say that, you know, if you used to be gifted, when you're a parent, you can't put two sentences together without being interrupted. So if you were gifted in school, you probably think you lost it. But I'm here to share with you that giftedness does not go away. And if you do not acknowledge your own giftedness, you end up with a catch-22. And that is, if you think you're average, then everybody else must be stupid. And that puts you in a very odd position. You think that it would be arrogant to think of yourself as gifted, but to not think of yourself as gifted, to think of yourself as average is actually more arrogant because it makes you less compassionate with your coworkers who don't think the way you think. So I'm going to give you a test for all of you who refuse to believe that you're gifted. Okay, see if anyone at any time in your life has ever asked you any of these questions. Why do you make everything so complicated? Why do you take everything so seriously? Why is everything so important to you? I can see some of you in my mind's eye having failed this test. If you don't think these apply to you, ask the person you live with. They will set you straight very quickly. The gifted are too everything. Too sensitive, too intense, too driven, too honest, too idealistic, too moral, too perfectionistic, and too much for other people. And Patty Gatto Walden, who has addressed this group, she's a psychologist who's worked with the gifted for decades, calls these the terrible twos. So the next time someone calls you too sensitive, consider that they might just not be sensitive enough. Is it the right amount of sensitivity to be able to sit and eat your dinner and digest while you're watching the war in Ukraine? There is a new book out called Sensitive by Jen Graneman and Andre Solo. And I encourage you to take a look at it because it really tells you a lot about how important sensitivity is. Okay, so we're going to continue with trying to deal with those of you who are unconvinced. I'm not gifted because many years ago, I was invited to give a keynote address at the University of Washington. It was probably the first conference that was ever held on giftedness in women. And when I walked into this packed auditorium, I saw so many uncomfortable people who were dragged there, people who believed that they were at the wrong conference, that I threw out my speech and I just put up this sign, I'm not gifted because, and I said, okay, none of you think you belong here. You're certain you're not gifted. What is your reason that you tell yourself? I'm not gifted because. And here are some of the answers that they said. I have a terrible memory. I couldn't concentrate during lectures. I wasn't an A student. I was a troublemaker. I didn't do well on my SATs. I didn't enjoy reading. I could never do math. I'm just an overachiever. So see if any of these excuses sound familiar. Now ask yourself this question, and this is a good one for Randy. If you were in charge of a program for the gifted, would any of these reasons be sufficient to disqualify a student for consideration for a gifted program? Okay, so let's talk about overachievers. And if you were all in an in-person audience, I would say, okay, which of you is an overachiever? And okay, Randy, you raised your hand, you're stuck. Tell me why you think you're an overachiever.
I guess I feel like I take on a lot all the time and always want to make sure it's done well, and always strive for the little extra to stand apart or perform better than I think the expectation was set.
Well, that sounds to me like a high achiever, but we're going to talk more about overachievement. So what exactly is an overachiever? I asked a whole group of teachers this one year, a group of teachers in Texas, and I'm going to share with you their responses, their choice. Someone who thinks that second place is the first loser. Someone who doesn't know the word no. Someone who sets a goal and not only achieves it, but goes beyond. That sounds like it fits you, Randy. Someone who compensates for weaknesses by putting in hours above and beyond. Now, the next one is one of my very favorites. Someone who sets unrealistic goals and then meets them. How unrealistic could they be if you were able to meet them? Someone who puts work above relationships. Someone who chooses not to delegate. Someone who gets ulcers worrying about insignificant details. Someone who's trying to achieve someone else's goals. Someone who has to be absolutely perfect. Someone who is not satisfied unless he or she gets an A. Someone who goes beyond the requirements. Someone who always makes extra work for him or herself. Now, here's my all-time favorite. Someone who exceeds his or her potential. Like, how exactly does that work? If you don't have the potential, you can't achieve it. If you did achieve it, it must mean that you had the potential to do it. So we have at Gifted Development Center, we give achievement tests and IQ tests. And I believe that when a child achieves on an achievement test a higher score than he or she got on the IQ test, that we have an underestimate of that child's abilities, because you can't get a higher achievement score than you're capable of getting. It's not possible to achieve beyond your potential. So if you get something higher in achievement, that means that the predicted IQ, which is supposed to be a predictor of achievement, is an underestimate. And there's so many reasons for that. So have you ever studied for a test? You really, really studied hard. You knew the material, but the instructor asked you questions that you did not study and you did not get a good grade. Did that ever happen to any of you? The reason that happens is because all tests only test your performance at a given moment on a given set of items, whether you were prepared for those particular items or not. And your performance is never, never, never the full picture of what you're capable of. Your competence is always greater than your performance. Randy, do you agree with this? You agree?
Yeah, I would say that's
If that's true,
a picture, it's a snapshot, right? And your competence is everything you're capable of.
Then how on earth can anyone be an overachiever? Your performance is always less than your competence. In an IQ test, an aptitude test, an achievement test, a class test, in your life responsibilities, you can't outperform your competence. Therefore, all of us are underachievers and nobody is an overachiever. We have to really think twice about whether we're going to continue to use that term to describe ourselves or each other, or especially our kids and our students. Because overachievers are by and large females. The term is used differentially to describe high achieving females. Oh, she's not really smart, she just works hard. She works hard to overcome the fact that she's really not that smart. It doesn't work that way. Marie Curie was not an overachiever. She worked hard. Rachmaninoff was not an overachiever. They were high achievers who worked hard. So I'm on a mission to have us eliminate the term overachiever from our vocabulary. I don't think it serves anybody. So what exactly is giftedness? There are a lot of theories out there. And if you've taken any courses lately in gifted education, you're going to be pretty confused with this test that I'm going to give you. So pick the best answer of what you think giftedness is. Is it high achievement? Is it the potential for eminence? Is it a strong work ethic and motivation? Some of you are thinking most correct answers are C, so it must be a strong work ethic. A success mindset, or exceptional abstract reasoning ability. Okay, Randy, I'm putting you on the spot. What do you think?
I'm gonna say probably E, because I feel like definitely A, C, and D are wrong.
Okay, high achievement and giftedness are two different things. And it's very camp in academia today to think that the purpose of gifted education is to create future eminent people. And you need a strong work ethic and a lot of motivation and a success mindset. But I think all kids need a success mindset because all kids have the potential to be successful. That's not what giftedness is. Whether the child is 2 years old or the adult is 92 years old, exceptional abstract reasoning ability is the answer I would have chosen. That doesn't go away. It's innate and it stays with you throughout your entire lifespan. It doesn't matter whether you have patents, whether you have recognition for your achievement. I mean, they don't recognize parents and teachers too often. They don't make it to eminent men in history. And you can have a very strong work ethic and a lot of motivation. But if it's not coupled with exceptional abstract reasoning ability, you're really not going to come up with anything earth-shaking in your life. But with abstract reasoning ability, you can do things that are very unusual. So here's a problem with the eminence theory. It's problematic to have been identified for a gifted program as a child and then learn you can only be a gifted adult if you're eminent. If you're not eminent, does that mean you were never gifted in the first place? Doesn't make sense to me. Gifted education is the only branch of special education where there are different criteria for children and for adults. When you think about it, you think about dyslexia. It's the same in kids and adults. Learning disabilities, the same in kids as adults. Intellectual disability, the same in kids as in adults. Only in gifted education do we think recognized achievement is what giftedness in adulthood is all about. I see it quite differently. I think giftedness is a psychological reality. I think it actually changes the psyche. Giftedness creates qualitatively different life experiences. If giftedness were understood as an organizing principle, it would be apparent that a person does not outgrow giftedness, no more than anyone outgrows significant intellectual disability. The issues faced by this group in childhood simply morph into new variations in adulthood. Here is a critical piece of information. Few people get it. Few people grasp the fundamental experience of giftedness, the outsider status in a society suspicious of outsiders. Think about that. That's what people need to understand to work with the gifted. So let's take a look at the gift itself. Here you have a mind that is wired differently. You're thinking all the time. It's difficult to turn off your brain, even to go to sleep at night. My husband used to say to me, "Don't you get tired of thinking?" As if I had a choice, like I could stop thinking at any time. But having an unusual mind does lead to other things. It makes the gifted individual, child or adult, feel cut off from other people, out of sync with the rest of their classmates or their colleagues at work. And it also means feeling responsible for everything. How many of you make lists? I started making lists from the time I was 11 years old. And I felt like the whole world depended on whether I fulfilled the responsibilities on my list. So if you've got a list, the chances are your mind creates ideas constantly, and that you're at the mercy of all these ideas that your mind comes up with that thinks, "Oh boy, you need to do this. I'm going to write this down on my list." Learning to control a relentlessly creative mind is like trying to lasso a bull in an open field. It basically goes wherever it wants to. And creative ideas come at the most inopportune times. You're in the middle of making love. No, wait, I have to write this down. How many of you wear many hats and try to juggle more than is humanly possible? All of it seems interesting and worthwhile if there were only an infinite amount of time. And how many of you set very, very high standards for yourself? How many of you are not satisfied just doing a good enough job? You want to do the very best you can do in everything. That's what giftedness looks like. So I'm going to tell you more about the characteristics of giftedness, but first I want to share with you that impossible dreams are realized, unrealistic, quote, goals achieved, insurmountable obstacles surmounted by people whose vision is a more powerful reality than the limitations that most of the world accepts as real. We can't tell a gifted student or a gifted child, be realistic. They are Don Quixote. They are going to chase windmills. They are going to set high standards for themselves, and they're going to accomplish things way beyond what any of us imagine possible. You are intense, complex, sensitive, perfectionistic, idealistic, mission-driven, indignant about justices that no one else even notices. This is all part of the gifted experience. I call these gifted problems. So here are some more indications of the characteristics of gifted adults. How many of you have heard the term asynchrony or asynchronous development? That asynchrony does not go away in adulthood. It stays with you. Perceptiveness, seeing beneath the surface of things, complexity. If you don't think you're complex, ask your significant other. This person will tell you that if there's a complex way of doing it, you will find it. Perfectionism comes with the territory, as does idealism and overexcitability. How many of you have heard of overexcitability? We're going to be talking more about that. Intensity, sensitivity, need for meaning, moral concern, divergent thinking, questioning authority, argumentativeness. Now, I've come across two kinds of gifted kids. They are both argumentative, but only one of them is argumentative to your face. The other group that you don't think of as argumentative are arguing with you all the time in their heads, but they're polite and you don't know what they're thinking. Responsibility, aesthetic sense, a love of beauty, possibly introverted. The higher the IQ, the more often we find gifted individuals to be introverted. And sense of humor. Lita Hollingworth called that the saving grace of the gifted. These qualities, these characteristics are lifelong and differentiate the experience of gifted individuals from birth to maturity. Cognitive complexity gives rise to emotional depth and sensitivity. Thus, the gifted not only think differently from their peers, they also feel differently. Anything worth feeling is worth feeling intensely. Nothing is simple, bland, or colorless. Everything is electrically charged with rich, multicolored layers of meaning. That's why I call gifted families living opera. So the term overexcitability, which a lot of people are not fond of, means super stimulatability. It's translated from the Polish. It's a term I can't pronounce, so I won't bother. But it means that you have a different wiring, that you're wired to react on a more intense level. And those of you who know about overexcitabilities will immediately recognize cognitive complexity, emotional sensitivity, heightened imagination, and magnified sensations as four of the overexcitabilities, or we call them OEs. They combine to create what Michael Piavsky says in the most delicious way, a different quality of experiencing, vivid, absorbing, penetrating, encompassing, complex, commanding, a way of being quiveringly alive. So here is the person who came up with overexcitabilities, Casimir Dombrowski. And he observed overexcitabilities in gifted populations in Poland, but they didn't have a name for gifted. So he was really studying individuals at a school for creative individuals. And he came up with 5 channels of heightened experience or overexcitability: psychomotor, sensual, imaginational, intellectual, and emotional. We often called it at the University of Denver Dombrowski's theory of emotional development, because the focus of this theory is on the emotional overexcitability and the development of emotional expertise. So what exactly is overexcitability? It's a greater capacity to respond to stimuli. And OE also stands for original equipment. So we see babies who come in with a neurological predisposition to respond with greater intensity to stimuli. The overexcitabilities can be thought of as an abundance of physical, sensual, creative, intellectual, and emotional energy, which cause inner turmoil, but can result in creative endeavors, as well as advanced emotional and ethical development in adulthood. When you think of the term over, it sounds like too much. Well, think of it this way. Imagine having too much money, or too much health, or too much creativity, or too much intelligence. This is a good thing. This is a good thing to have a lot of. So when I go over these, I want you to ask yourself these questions. Which characteristics fit you as a child? Which characteristics fit you now? Which of them bring you joy? And which of them bring you pain? So we're going to start with psychomotor overexcitability. Rapid speech, marked excitation, intense physical activity, pressure for action. You're the one at the meeting that said, okay, we've talked about this long enough. Now what are we going to do about it? Competitiveness or enjoying competitive games, compulsive talking, nervous habits, and workaholism. I'm a workaholic. At 82, I'm still working full-time or overtime. The next one is sensual. This is my personal favorite. Enhanced sensory pleasure. Seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, like Linus, hearing. Delight in beautiful objects, sounds of words, music, form, color, balance. Overeating, buying sprees, wanting to be in the limelight. So here are some examples of sensual overexcitability. I'm a bubble bath person. I feel like there's very little in life that can't be solved with a really good bubble bath. Try it. So how many of you like chocolate cake? Or how many of you love chocolate cake? So that's an excitability. But how many of you have a spiritual experience when you have really wonderful dark chocolate? That's an overexcitability. That's the difference between everybody likes chocolate cake versus, oh, this is very, very special. So here's imaginational overexcitability. Free play of the imagination, frequent use of image and metaphor, facility with fantasy, imaginary companions, mixing of truth and fiction, low tolerance of boredom, need for novelty and variety. One of my favorite truth and fiction examples is this one child who kept coming home every day and saying to her mother, I can't stand the way the teacher treats Jenny. Every day, the mother would hear another story until she couldn't take it anymore. And she went to school and she said to the teacher, I really need to talk with you about your relationship with Jenny. And the teacher said, who's Jenny? She had been made up. So Gary Larson, here's sensual overexcitability. He's really wants one of those cookies in the cookie jar, but at the bottom of the stairs, he's absolutely certain there are crocodiles. And so his imaginational OE versus his sensual OE are in conflict. Intellectual OE is the one we think about for gifted children or gifted adults. Avid reading, probing questions, keen observation, detailed visual recall, independence of thought, sometimes very critical, preoccupation with logic, thinking about thinking, love of theory and analysis. Were you the person as a child who said why all the time to your parents until they couldn't take it anymore? Emotional overexcitability is the heart of this theory. Intensified complex feelings and emotions, strong somatic expressions, tense stomach, blushing, sweaty palms. Powerful emotional expressions, enthusiasm, ecstasy, affective memory, anxiety, guilt, depressive, and suicidal moods, capacity for deep attachments and relationships, difficulty adjusting to newness, compassion and empathy. So a lot of people have asked, can we distinguish overexcitabilities from ADHD or from sensory processing disorder or from a host of other issues? Yes, we can. And at Gifted Development Center, we give an overexcitability inventory for parents to fill out about their children, for all children who come to our center for testing. We also give a behavioral checklist, which is a checklist of characteristics of ADHD. And we give the short sensory profile, which is a way of determining which children may have sensory processing disorder. So if you've got a hammer, everything's going to look like that particular nail. The ADHD specialist is going to say, this kid has ADHD. The dyslexia specialist will say, this kid has dyslexia. I'm a gifted specialist. I'm going to see giftedness where other people miss that. But there is something that I'd like to recommend for parents, for teachers, for anyone listening to our presentation today. If you want to be really certain that you're looking at overexcitability and not something else, look at the positive descriptors. They were all in yellow. And if you notice, the vast majority of those descriptors were yellow. But if you saw something in orange, that was a negative aspect. And you can't be certain when you see a negative aspect that it's just an overexcitability, because it can be something else that's at the cause. If you have a child who thinks that they don't want to be here anymore, they feel like they don't want to live anymore, calling it emotional overexcitability is not helpful. You want to get this kid to a psychologist immediately and get some kind of assessment and some kind of treatment. The same is true for you or for your spouse or for your friends. You need to be looking at what negative characteristics of overexcitability might be attributable to something else, something that needs treatment. So whether you were identified as gifted as a child or you were missed, you need to own your own giftedness as an adult. Giftedness is part of your identity. You cannot fully understand yourself and others without embracing your giftedness. And if you still aren't convinced, do it for your children, because you can't expect them to understand and appreciate their own giftedness if you, as their major role model, refuse to acknowledge yours. Every gift contains a danger. Whatever gift we have, we are compelled to express. And if that expression of that gift is blocked, distorted, or merely allowed to languish, then the gift turns against us and we suffer. Many gifted adults, I call them the walking wounded, feel estranged and lonely, not realizing it is their own giftedness that is at the heart of the experience. Many feel that there's something wrong with them that's not fixable. And still others feel like imposters waiting to be unmasked. So there really is a downside to giftedness, but there's also an upside. This is both an up and a down. The gifted struggle constantly between integrity and accommodation, viewing all of life as a complex set of ethical dilemmas. The upside is that with giftedness comes an appreciation of ethics and an ability to look at things through an ethical lens. That's an upside. In adulthood, exceptional qualities and abilities can lead to a life vision, creating a sense of purpose larger than the self, the ultimate outcome of a gifted life. That is a message from Rosemary Cathcart in New Zealand. The ultimate outcome of a gifted life is creating a sense of purpose larger than the self. Many years ago, I was asked by SENG, Supporting Emotional Needs of the Gifted, to write 100 words of advice for gifted adults. And this is what I wrote. Giftedness is not what you do or how hard you work. It is who you are. You think differently. You experience life intensely. You care about injustice. You seek meaning. You appreciate and strive for the exquisite. You are painfully sensitive. You are extremely complex. You cherish integrity. Your truth-telling has gotten you into trouble. Should 98% of the population find you odd, seek the company of those who love you just the way you are. You are not broken. You do not need to be fixed. You are utterly fascinating. You are a gift to the world. You are needed. Your gifts are needed in the world. Never forget that. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I feel like that's something gifted adults probably need reminded of more often. While we're waiting for some questions to come in, we have quite a few people on the call right now, and everybody's been just commenting wonderful things about what you've been saying. And I'm hoping there were lots of head nods out there, because I know I was definitely like, this is me. We have people, just so you know, Linda, joining us from Brazil, Malaysia,
Wow.
British Columbia, Ohio, also Littleton. So all over here and far between. But while we're waiting for a couple questions to come up, would you, I shared it in the chat, but would you share about what you're offering at Gifted Development Center?
Yes. I helped to start the Colorado Association for Gifted and Talented. And I helped to start the Boulder, it was then called the Boulder Association for Gifted and Talented, and the Colorado Academy for Educators of Gifted, Talented, and Creative. So I am offering individuals who are members of all three, or any one of these organizations, I should say, a 10% discount on services at Gifted Development Center throughout all of 2023. You just need to call the office and say that you're a member of CAGT, and you'll get that discount.
That's so generous of you. And I think I know personally students who have used your services, and I think sometimes, you know, we talk about identifying students as gifted and, well, why do we do it? And especially with some of our programs that struggle to be meaningful programs. But I do think there's a part of being identified and having those assessments done that are so critical to just knowing why you feel different, how your brain works. You know, I've talked to many gifted adults in my studies through Gifted Ed who didn't realize they were gifted until they started studying gifted education. And then the light bulbs went on for them. That explains so much about my childhood. That explains why I felt that way. That explains, you know, why I felt so different or other as I was growing up. And if someone would have sat me down and explained to me, or helped me find my tribe, my, you know, childhood experience would have been better. And I've heard that. That's my own lived experience, but I've also heard that from many people. Francesca Godani says, meeting Linda has been life-changing for their family.
Thank you, Francesca. Francesca is taking many of my articles and translating them into her blog for individuals in Italy.
Oh, wow. Awesome. So, okay, we've got questions rolling in now. Here we go. Rolling up the sleeves. Lucia, I believe Lucia is joining us from Brazil. she would like to know about twice exceptionality and the challenges of teaching gifted and autistic students.
Well, this is my special heartthrob, 2E kids. I got my PhD at the University of Southern California. And on the first day, I said that I want to learn about the learning disabilities, the different exceptionalities in the gifted, because I had come across so many in my own family and so many kids that I worked with that were gifted and something else. So twice exceptional children are what we mostly assess now. I'd say over 90% of the children who come to Gifted Development Center are twice exceptional. Or now the term is being used multi-exceptional because it's rarely just one other exceptionality. It's usually many. I think it's important to find out what this particular child's passion is and to let the child lead you in determining what excites him or her. And that will help you, whether you're dealing with autistic children, children with ADHD, children who are dyslexic, children who have visual or auditory or sensory issues, no matter what, find out their passion, find out what excites them, ask them what they do after school for fun, ask them what they imagine themselves doing with their lives when they're adults, and try to make the teaching as meaningful as you can, devoted to their interests. Make it an be the person who shows them how they can take their current passion with your help and turn it into a lifetime career. And they will love you forever.
That's great advice, Linda. And I think very applicable to a lot of our students. I think about gifted and ADD as well, that novelty and interest and intensity. We did have a question about a book that you recommended, and we had already posted Sensitive in the chat, so we attached that as well to that question. There is a question here about, let me get back. How do we talk to our children so they don't mask their giftedness to fit in?
All right, this is the second question about kids. I will answer this, but I want the next question to be about you. This is what this is about. This is not about your kids. It's not about the kids you teach, and it's not about the kids you're raising. This is a very good way for you to avoid the whole purpose of today's presentation. Giftedness is also about you. If you're a teacher that went into this field, guess what? Most teachers don't say, oh, joy, I want to go figure out how to work with the gifted. They don't. It's only teachers who are gifted themselves who are even interested. When I was teaching at the University of Denver, I had the gifted education graduate program there. And the first class, I always considered group therapy. And I would say, okay, you want to get a master's degree in gifted education. Right. Tell me why. Why does that interest you? Why are you here? And every one of them, every single student would tell me about their brother, their sister, the student they missed, some kid, but never about themselves. Not one of them would talk about themselves. And I would say, oh, this is interesting. You've got gifted children. And many of them would raise their hand. Oh, yes, we've got gifted kids. How interesting. You've got gifted kids. Are you gifted? And they didn't think they were. And I'd say, well, I'm going to give you the litmus test. How many of you would rather talk to a gifted child a gifted student in your class, then talk with the other teachers in the teacher's lounge. And then I had them. They were willing to proceed with the program, knowing that it was going to be at least partially group therapy. Okay, Randy, read the question again. I promise I'll answer this one.
I think you answered it without answering it. I think, and this is what I got from what you just said, the question was, how do we talk to our children so they don't mask their giftedness to fit in? And I think the answer you just answered is that as adults, we have to stop masking our giftedness, own it, admit it, share it, say, I am gifted, because kids are never going to feel safe being gifted and admitting that they're gifted if we can't do it ourselves.
Okay.
So you answered it.
I think the way to unmask is to find them other gifted kids that they don't feel they have to put on a mask for. If you find them other kids to connect with that are just as smart as they are, just as sensitive as they are, who have the same kind of ethical conflicts and the same concerns about what are we doing to the environment that they have, all of the same concerns and interests that they have, then they won't hide. They will energetically find each other and they'll raise each other up. But they'll mask if they don't feel safe. They have to feel safe. And you're acknowledging, like Randy said, you're acknowledging your own giftedness is another way of making them feel safe.
Absolutely. And I think that's something, and because we don't really have any more questions here, but I would like to, give you one of my own, because I know that you could expound on this. I think one of the challenges as gifted adults, I think it's hard to form friendships as adults anyway. We all, especially once you have children or careers, I think it's especially hard for gifted adults to form friendships because we tend, those intensities and those passions tend to be something that exhausted adults don't always have the patience for. So other exhausted adults don't have the patience for the intensity of the topics that, like, sometimes I want to discuss. Like something will really bother me politically or environmentally or something, and I research it and dive into it, and I want to talk about it, and I want to digest it and fight about it and grapple with it. And other people are just too exhausted to put up with me. And I feel like maybe I might not be the only one. I hope I'm not the only one who feels this way, but I feel like sometimes my too much is sometimes just too much for other people.
People can only take me in small doses. And that's okay with me. I'm all right with that. So here's the biggest issue that I see. And it doesn't quite address what you were saying, but I think it's related. And that's what D. LeVecchi calls the gifted giver. A lot of gifted adults, many of them women, are always giving, always the giving person in the relationship. And they're not receiving at the same level that they're giving. And that is an exhausting situation to be in, where you're not getting refilled from your interactions with others that'll enable you to continue to give. I think one of the things we have to do in all of our relationships, every single relationship we have with every other person on the planet, is to ask ourselves one question. Does this person feed me or drain me? If you feel fed, nourished, like being with this person lifts you up, inspires you, you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel equal, you feel appreciated, that's a person who's feeding you. But if you come away from an interaction feeling drained, you really have to ask yourself, is it wise for me to continue a relationship where I'm doing all the giving and this person is doing all the receiving, and I'm not getting much back out of it? Every relationship needs to be looked at in that way. so that you are surrounding yourself with people who aren't too exhausted to be able to say, wow, I love that idea. What a great idea that is. And who love hearing your ideas and who love to hear you expound and who don't get tired. I surround myself with people who don't get tired of me.
Yeah, I always walk away from interactions going, oh God, did I just info opinion dump on them and make them uncomfortable? And, so I'm seeing in the chat though that I'm not the only one. So that makes me feel better. All right. Well, I'm just looking. I think we have, I don't see any more questions. I'm seeing lots of affirmations and, yeah, that's it. I'm, relating to what you're saying. And I do think it's important, Linda, that you called us on that, the whole asking the questions about kids, because we do serve kids, but a lot of us here are all gifted too. And I think we tend to put ourselves on the back burner. So
Yeah.
I appreciate what you've shared with us tonight. And I do appreciate, I don't know if I was the only one like near tears a couple times, because it does just, it's so important to remind ourselves that these are the things that make us different.
I want to share something for parents. One of the things that's very difficult to get your children to do is go to sleep. They're so afraid they're going to miss something. And instead of telling your kids that they should go to sleep because it's good for them, tell them that they need to go to sleep because it's good for you. Because you need a break from them, that you need adult time, that you're in the middle of a good book that you want to get back to reading. You want to watch a television program. You need to chill. You want to play solitaire on your phone or whatever it is that you want to do. Let your kids know that you have needs as an adult and that your entire world doesn't revolve around them, so that they learn to do things not because you said do it because I said so, or do it because I think it's good for you, but because it's good for you as the parent, for your kid to just go to your room. I don't care what you do. You want to read until 11 o'clock, just close the door and leave me alone. I need alone time. I need a break. If you want me not to be grumpy tomorrow, don't keep coming back to me over and over and over again. Just take care of yourself so that I have time for me. That's a very important message for us to give our kids, that we are people with needs. We're not self-sacrificing, child-oriented, 24-hour a day at their disposal. I don't think that's a good message we want to give them. We want to tell them we have needs too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so I did miss a question. Somebody pointed out that I did miss a question. So, oh gosh, and there's another one. Oh boy, we're gonna have to stop questions here soon, but let's get the last couple in. Holy moly, everybody suddenly jumped on. First thing, how do we not sound arrogant or boastful when we talk about ourselves as gifted? Because of the connotation that it sometimes is.
I don't think you have to talk about yourself as gifted, as certainly not, you don't go into your office and announce to all of your colleagues, hey, I'm gifted. That isn't where you do it. But you certainly do announce it to your kids, and that you have the same issues that they've got, and that you've had these your whole life, so that they know they're not something that's just for kids. I think it's perfectly okay when you're out with somebody that you've known this person a long time, you know that they're gifted. It's okay to share that secret with somebody else who you know is also gifted and may be afraid to use the G word. But you just have to be careful who you disclose this to. It's okay to say it to other gifted people.
Yeah, Yeah, like a safe space to share that and then and take ownership of that for sure. Okay, a couple more questions. We got 2 more here, I think, unless I'm missing more, but I think I've got them all in the chat here. Just lost it. Okay, do you think gifted visual learners are also ones who take so much in?
Yes, I do. I'm staying with Linda Levitin. She's the most visual person I know, and was the basis for my writing the book Upside Down Brilliance. It was pretty much about her. And I'm not a visual person. I remember I was invited to speak in St. Charles one year, and I was put in a bed and breakfast. And I woke up the next morning and the elves had built a fireplace right next to my bed that wasn't there when I went to sleep because I just didn't see it. I don't know how you miss a fireplace, but I missed it. So the visual spatial individuals rarely miss anything that's going on visually in their environment. And Linda sees so much more than I see. And I get to, now that I'm here with her, I get to see how amazing that visual ability is. She's a real visual thinker.
It's awesome. Yeah, I definitely miss things sometimes. Oh, that was there. I'm going to see that. The last question we have, Debbie says, I struggle with, and my cat's joining the chat. Debbie says, I struggle with perfectionism and procrastination. Do the same strategies that apply to kids apply to adults?
Well, I have I'm the only psychologist I know that thinks of perfectionism as a good thing. I see it akin to the desire for excellence. I don't see them as two separate things at all. And some people define perfectionism only as a negative, that it's a recipe for disaster, for failure, for procrastination, for being a paralyzed perfectionist and always feeling like you're never good enough. But I've had some wonderful discussions with Linda Levitin since I've been here about perfectionism. And she said something very unique and interesting to me. She said, if you feel that you have the capacity to reach the level of perfection that you are trying to have in your life, in whatever it is that you're applying it to, then it's a positive and it propels you toward excellence. But if you feel that it's beyond your capacity and that you could never reach it, if you set up an impossible standard that you could never reach, then it becomes a negative, a paralyzing paralyzing trait. But my antidote to the paralysis of it is this. It's called prioritizing. Try not to be a perfectionist in everything. I try to have clients make a list of what they care about the most to what they care about the least. And then I tell them, be a perfectionist in what you care about the most and let go of it in what you care about the least. If you don't have a picture perfect bathroom that can be, in Better Homes and Gardens tomorrow, if a photographer should knock on your door right now, so what? Because the chances are a photographer isn't going to knock on your door this evening, and it doesn't really matter. But if everything has to be perfect all the time, then you're pretty much a victim of your perfectionism. You can get it to work for you if you channel it toward what you care about the most.
I love that. And it also falls into my list making problem. I prioritize, then I have to make a list, right? Oh, awesome, Linda. Thank you so much for sharing tonight. And I know that many people are going want to rewatch this presentation, we had a bunch of people join late. So if you did join late and you are just bummed that you missed the meat of Linda's presentation tonight, you can rewatch it here on Facebook. That's fine. But you can also rewatch it on coloradogifted.org. Under resources, we have a conversations with CAGT link where we warehouse all of our conversations with CAGT that we have been able to record, and you can go back and revisit anything that you want to within this presentation. I know I found it validating and helpful and cathartic. So I hope that the people who joined us this evening did too. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. Let me see who we're with in 2 weeks. I don't know if we have our guest lined up yet. Oh, we do. Our guest I think I'll be back with you on May 2nd, possibly. We will be with Adam Lanningham, talking about trauma and giftedness.
Great.
May 2nd, please join us again. Please check out all the resources on coloradogifted.org, including the recording of Linda's presentation, which should be up in a day or two. So
Thank you.
again, Linda.
Take care.